Welcome, everyone, to the finals of the Urasauraus Cup. I'll get the logo on here, and you guys can see the gigantic dinosaur. Oh, God. Just put that in the top there. There we go. Beautiful. And then, the finals are between this guy in the top right, Byun, and this guy in the bottom left, Shin. This is the tournament that is currently replacing the North American Open Cup on Mondays. Having to figure out between actually two organizations that both wanted to fill that time slot as we wait for the weeklies to come back. But the other one was with Light VIP and the Crankly Ducklings, I believe, and I think they moved theirs to another date, which I'm not sure of. But I know this did happen on Monday. I did not get to cast it. Some things popped up, but we get to see what the finals look like here now. So best of 5 TVZ. I already got Byun doing something that, well, is not surprising. Has certainly dwindled, I suppose, in the amount that he's used it. He was doing this literally every single TVZ for a couple of months at least. Either that or CC first into a nasty 2-base build, but he was doing a lot of this, and he did kind of pull back on it to a certain degree, but I love that he still includes it. I love that it's still something that Terrans have as an option, because I think that as a build, it already has so much flexibility. But then you add in, I guess, Byun, who is really one of the most flexible Terrans, not as far as his wrists are concerned, which are kind of messed up, but as far as the amount of build orders and the type of Terran play that he's comfortable playing with, there doesn't really seem to be an uncomfortable style of play for Byun when it comes to this matchup, although I've never seen him mech, and maybe that is something he doesn't like, but he doesn't do it, so it doesn't matter. And it's not really meta anyway, so he doesn't really need to do it. But for the 2 racks, you know, he can go into the 3CC. He likes the 2-1-1 after that. He adds a little Banshee, kind of times it up perfectly. He can go into the 3 or even 4 racks and really all in. Of course, he can be 3 racksing with this. If this command center wasn't coming down, Shin knows that it's not an all in anymore. He doesn't worry that much, but it is the Reaper Micro of Byun, so you're always going to be a little worried. But they can also do something that is really not, you know, generally that great, I suppose, which is actually going to even like a 2-base all-in, which really they're so old and the maps are generally so large, and blah, blah, blah. They're not usually supposed to work, but he will do it, and that's what's really scary about facing Byun in this matchup. But he is facing almost his equivalent of a player. Almost. I wouldn't say that Shin is exactly like him, but I think they do have a lot of similarities. And so whereas Byun can be early aggressive, so can Shin. Where Byun can do a tease or an old-fashioned all-in, so can Shin. Where Byun can kind of pick and choose out of a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen board holders, it does feel like so does Shin. As far as Zerg build orders are concerned, it's not nearly as, I suppose, impactful. It's not what's kind of like directing the game. You know, usually that's more of Terran's role to kind of direct the ebb and flow, and the Zerg player is usually the one that reacts, right? But you can also change that up if you're, you know, like a Roach player, you go aggressive, right? And Shin can do all of those things. So their races remain, you know, too distinct to say that they're the same, but I feel like you do see some similar qualities. So both players definitely scary to play against. And so you might get a lot of more question marks than you would in a typical TVZ as a viewer, but then also you can maybe even tell in the game. You can be like, well, Shin usually would commit right there. Why didn't he commit? And vice versa for Byun, where Byun's like, well, I need to commit. Oh, wait a second, it's Shin. What if he built 100 lings, where other people would build 50 drones? You just don't know, and kind of case in point here, we do have Shin going for, you know, a later 3rd base, but then also this fairly fast lair that is already about 80% done. Roach Warren coming down with it, and Byun does not know anything about this. He actually didn't confirm the 3rd base timing either. Didn't see the drone mining the minerals, and that was the intent. Of course, I think he did check over here, but that's not really where it's coming down. But even if it was like a triangle 3rd taken at a responsible timing, you need that follow-up scout, and that's currently what Byun is missing. He is going into a 2-base build, so that actually sets him up rather rather well for any type of early aggression as far as early in this context. You know, if it was any earlier, if it wasn't a lair-based attack, then, you know, I think we would actually be in a little bit of trouble without that factory providing a lot of strong units. But with it being, actually, Byun needs a scout is what he needs to do. This is actually really worrying. Right now, the roach number is not that intimidating, but 8 more roaches are on the way. And you don't want to be losing any of these units because they're going to have to race back home and defend against the roach swell. So, I don't know. This actually still remains, kind of favored to Byun. He pounces on Shin, kind of taking over the, no, you're afraid of me, actually. You're in the room with me. And that is, you know, the best he could really do, I suppose. Maybe once he was off of creep, he could be... or maybe more grenades could have allowed him to escape. But trying to jump on top of a still low number of roaches, snipe individual roaches, as well as the Ravagers in particular. I mean, that's also a play. But you really have to be sure not to just lose all your Marines and Reapers without really providing any pushback, because this is a kind of scary attack. It's completely upgradeless except for the roach speed. But that does mean that the roaches are reinforcing very quickly on a short map like this. It just seems like Shin actually never got to the appropriate number of roaches. Combat shields did finish up. Medivacs are included, really help out against that sustained damage of the roaches. But honestly, if Shin had, let's see here, 13 plus 13. If he had 26 roaches all together and then more reinforcing, I don't think Byun is able to take some of those fights. You know, he took this one over here, then he took that one over there, and it's Shin who comes out looking much more awkward for this. And now Byun, I mean, he should be feeling very comfortable in this game, because even though he did push away that third CC, only just now at 75% done, his opponent has clearly pushed off a lot of drone production, hasn't he? So you're actually feeling pretty golden, I would say. This is usually the one thing that you're concerned about, is that they could be running away with the game to a certain extent, and you got to really pedal to the metal as far as the drops. But in this case, absolutely not. No one's running away with the game, as Byun's not going to have any type of kill timing anytime soon. But I would say that Byun finds himself in a better macro game than what was possible. I was actually pretty... well, excited is the right word, but I was very interested to see what Shin's build would actually look like, and then it just it hit at all the wrong moments. It was very awkward indeed. Thank you, Roberts Bob, for the sub, as well as Angry AC2 for the raid. Now we have the typical fallback into the defensive position here for Shin. You know, with such a odd opener, he couldn't really have transitioned this into a 1-1 roach all-in. I mean, this might have been a powerful move had everything gone according to plan. Then you follow up with the big right hook, and then maybe Byun dies. But it was so awkward that I think having to play this out in a macro sense and hope that Byun overextends or isn't aggressive enough, either one, would work out. And when it comes to Byun, the latter is pretty unlikely. So you just kind of are hoping that Byun overextends, which so far he is not. We got 2 drops finding massive success, especially the one on the right side. It just grabbed all of the roaches, all of the Ravagers. The left side was a little bit better for Shin, but not by much. That 1-1 Medivac Combat Shield Stim Marine facing those 0-0 roaches really worked out right there for Byun, who also just picks up and continues running around. You know, the roaches might be a little speedier, but they're still not as fast as Medivacs, and they still have to traverse a lot of annoying areas. 7 drones also go down, but it's really just the amount of Roach Ravager that went down there that was shocking about it. Look at the gas difference. Wow, okay. All right, yeah. I mean, Byun was like letting him live, and Shin absolutely just was like, yeah, this game's not going anywhere. Let's just cut our losses, which is fine. I think that is respectable, but just a little surprising. Usually there's always that one last push, right? Like, maybe something happens. Nope, not there. So Shin, I mean, he goes for an unorthodox build on this map. It is a map that kind of demands the Zerg to be aggressive and be maybe even a little tricky. But this one, facing a 2cc, 2-1-1... yeah, I think it had the possibility of working in a really ideal scenario, but not this one. All right, so Byun goes up 1-0. And we're game number 2 here. It's going to be on site Delta. Bottom right, it is Byun. Top left, it is Shin. And, you know, Crimson Court first map, Zerg's kind of the one who has more of the onus on them, even though it's the Terran structure that really kind of dictates how a game usually goes in TVZ. Of course, there are times when Zerg can try and be the bigger bully and can try and throw a wrench into that usual construct of a matchup, and they kind of have to on that map. It's just usually not done with that build. Literally just like a roach speed all-in. Is very interesting, you know, but it's definitely not the one we usually see. You know, that is probably a good thing because, you know, we saw Cyril do the same all-in twice on that map, and then... Well, it didn't. It worked the first time, to be fair. It did work the first time, but it got totally bopped the second time. And then we've seen a lot of 1-1 roach all-ins, but that, again, might be a little too on the nose. And... it is a case that Byun does go for a lot of, you know, risky strategies if you hit the right time. Because of the lack of factory units coming out from Byun's builds, the racks into the command center, into possibly a third command center, before finally adding on that starport and so on and so forth, and you just don't really use your factory for anything except add-ons. That's going to take away a lot of the dependable early game defense, and while Marines eventually get really good, they do need to be in a larger number. So we oftentimes even see Byun possibly very aware of that potential weakness. He not only has impeccable Reaper scouting, but then also adds in a Banshee that kind of fits into his build anyway, because he can't get medevacs with only 10 Marines out. So he gets a Banshee, then he has 16 Marines with his medevacs, but still, it also would help against some of those off-timed pushes, I suppose. Not the super early ones that the Reapers would definitely scout and help out against, but not the super, I suppose, late ones, like a 1-1 Roach all-in. So I like Shin's idea. It was all types of awkward. I don't even want to compare it, you know. There's one comparison I usually go to, but I'm not even going to do it. It was awkward. It could have worked in the right time, in the right place, and it didn't. So we move on. Shin moves on as well. As one thing that Shin's pretty good at is moving on from failed all-ins, right? You try something that doesn't work, whatever. It's also best of 5 where you can have a little more of that allowance. And so Byun, happy to take game 1, but also might have been expecting it on a map like Crimson Court. Now both on a site delta, a little more balanced as far as the overall matchup. He is going to be going once again into a more Marine-heavy build. Command Center is coming down, but then third rack's on the top there. We got 3 Reapers and 3 Reapers only, which almost became 2. Fortunately, that 1 Reaper will survive. And because that 1 Reaper survives, I mean... yeah, I think the 3rd Reaper makes the hatchery cancel a possibility. In fact, I think Shin even is like... wait, no, he just had an extra 160 minerals, so he just didn't build any extra queens.
Twitch Prime sub received.
Interesting. And now, because his 3rd wasn't canceled, he just grabs his 4th and is like, okay. I don't know. This is weird. Bipolar, but I think for the 3 months. Zerg isn't my strong suit, but, you know, I notice patterns to a degree. That is a very, very, very fast 4th base. And, you know, you might be like, well, if he gets away with it, he gets away with it. That's fantastic, right? Well, you know, the downside really is the number of queens that he has. The 4th hatchery makes up for the lack of larva injects to an extent. And, I mean, eventually he will have 4 queens injecting. So it's about, you know, bridging that gap. But then it's also going to be about picking and choosing the inject versus the creep tumor, right? So in this case, we had Shin put down those creep tumors. And has missed, you know, a couple of injects that I suppose would usually be going down. Very interesting. You know, because even if he did end up canceling that 3rd hatch, like I thought might be possible with the 3 Reapers, he still would have delayed his queens. So... you know, that, again, it does come down to he's kind of getting away with it. There might be more of a bump, more of a slower build-up as far as those injects and creep spread, you know, with the queens factoring into a TVZ. But eventually, I imagine this kind of looks all very similar at, you know, maybe minute 6 or 7. And then... maybe the drone count is in this? I mean, I'm just trying to think of the implications here. Well, the implications that it's one more place to defend when you don't have a lot of units. I mean, literally, you know, some lower queen count means lower transfuse count. So, queens can be your first line of defense with that Overlord Barrier survived. When it comes to some of the earlier attacks, which Byun is really one to do. Absolutely. He doesn't have to wait for the medevacs, although it's usually wise to wait for your medevacs. He often does not, and then so that's the queen's job to be the kind of like oh fuck button as a Zerg, because they have hopefully, you know, 2 or 3 transfuses in case something early happens. Actually, in this case that would have been missing, but we are up to the 8 queens that we would typically see around this time. They just maybe don't have as much again energy, or their creep isn't as far as it could have been. And the vulnerable 4th base, I do believe, would have been vulnerable if Byun had gone right to it, but he had never scouted the 4th base. He doesn't know that he could go right to it and abuse that severe lack of creep spread as well as a choke here. He went down the middle of the road to spook the Zerg player and get them to stop making drones. With Shin, he's at 61 drones. Obviously, he'll get higher once he actually deals with this aggression and he's got his 4 bases all well and set, but I think the most important thing is that he did respect the move out, but then the move out didn't really hit the vulnerable spot. You know, he didn't want to gun down the middle of the road on the creep spread in case there were banelings. He didn't want to gun down the 3rd base in case there were banelings. And now, well, there definitely are banelings. Now even the creep spread on the 4th base is a little bit farther forward. Not by much. This isn't atypical for a ZDT, but it is the Zerg's deal. It's your deal in life. Trying to take care of this 4th base, even without that massive amount of creep spread, and that's usually something you can do. Now, that is a very nasty tank spot. This was all off of 2 bases as well. Don't forget that. No big delay on those extra production facilities because of the 3rd CC. It does mean that Byun really does need to do damage. Shin, so far, handling the hatchery with transfuse, is now going to go back in for the swarm of the Marines. Barely doesn't get that surround. The tank not going to take out all the banelings, however, so the surround eventually does impact Byun's ability to stand. He will have to evacuate. He only evacuates 8 Marines in his medevacs, though, so Shin just clearly having more, well, not more than enough, because you want to make sure you have more than enough as a Zerg player, so it's like more than enough is enough. Anyway, he had enough to really scare Byun and push that back, and it's really important that he doesn't entirely exhaust himself doing that, because you might think, wow, finally I pushed that back, but if you don't have excess banelings and lings ready to go for round number 2, which the Terran obviously is going to be on, then that is the crucial moment in which Terrans oftentimes do kill all your queens and do get on top of this weakened hatchery and kill it. So Shin still with those backup units making more banelings being finished as well, but the banelings coming in all clumped up, not very effective at all. That carapace far from being done. Those lings were entirely ineffective. Oof. Oof. The surround would have been beautiful if there were any banelings left over. Once again, Byun would have had to respect that, and he would have had to evacuate. But instead, the banelings all got shot down, forced to go off of creep, even though they finally got that baneling speed. 2 tanks blasting away. Good focus fire there from Byun. Really made that a problematic hold, because he is still alive. He's rebuilding. He's got his 4th hatchery, but it is problematic in that he is not really dislodging Byun, and then there's going to be more reinforcements. And Shin knows that. Shin's actually going to go for a very risky move, but perhaps the best move here, actually, with such a brutal position that he has to force himself into. He's instead going to avoid the position, basically, and go for not just a jump on top of the reinforcements, but an honest-to-God actual counterattack. There's a 3rd CC that would have been ripe if the SCVs were there. They're not. Time to go into the natural. The SCVs actually are. Banelings bust on through the supply depot. Tank not going to be able to take care of the banelings. Actually, the banelings explode on them, which is not usually the best use. But either way, point is, tank is gone, Marines are gone, 1-1 finishes for the Lings. Now the SCVs are all on their own. Lots of them going down as Shin just continues to hold on to the 4th base thanks to Transfuse and Queens. Byun can't really break through it with being distracted because he needs to worry about the banelings being made, and more are coming. 2 tanks still helpful, however, means that Shin can't push this all the way back, but he did just get 16 SCVs. Would have been fantastic to have that happen before the 3rd CC was ever planted down, but that's impossible, right? So there is a possibility for Byun to replace 3 SCVs at a time, but then he would also have to stop producing as many Marines and tanks. So Byun actually, notably, production tab, not replacing those SCVs. Third CC is basically a fake. It wasn't gonna be a fake. It was late. It was part of the build, but eventually that would have gotten some SCVs on it. Now, yeah, he's actually just kind of given up on the idea. Pedal to the metal right now, thinking that Shin might not have enough army after that counterattack to hold on, but once again, not really able to dig deep enough. That little drop, including a tank off to their right side, which, to be fair, does really confuse the defense. But oftentimes, a tank, especially with limited support and on creep, as it's dropping into the main, is actually not that impressive. But it does definitely complicate matters for Shin as far as how he usually deals with this, right? The tanks actually, the queens are going to go up to the high ground to try and deal with this. The tank not really all that efficient at killing them, so that's where it's having trouble. The medevacs are forced to flee. Fourth hatchery did finally get taken down. Seemed almost inevitable. And no, what? No, what? Okay, yeah. Back to being no for Shin. I thought Byun was going to let those Hydras live. No reason for that. Yeah, no, bunch of free Hydras as well. Shin starting to lose a little bit of control. That one tank in the main really did throw a wrench into things. I mean, again, it's like, Marines are scary versus Queens, actually. But a tank kind of isn't. And then just a certain number of Lings would have done it. But to actually calculate that in a split second kind of threw Shin off, understandably. And he does give up his fourth base at the same time that his fifth was finishing and capable of getting some mining done there. So he's just basically on 4 bases this entire time. Adding in those Hydras is going to add in some potential to deal with the medevacs, which are getting a decent number as well as just good DPS that hopefully never dies. Like Baneling, both of them are almost guaranteed suicidal. Obviously the Baneling is, but the Lings as well. Hydras, you never want to suicide them, right? They're always going to be in the backline DPS, being able to help out and being able to potentially help out against the drop phase that Byun might be going into. If he was, I was going to say actually going back into more of a macro stage, which he does pull back, but, doesn't really have to stay at home. Definitely not a situation where he stay at home. He's done enough damage, and Shin is still on the ropes. But he is now also including some SCV production. And if a Terran player does start to sit back, usually it's also when they pick up 4 medevacs and just drop all over the place. If this was not Byun sitting back at home, it was him trying to get aggressive again, but into the perhaps awaiting arms of Shin. Now a little drop on that top side actually being a bit of a surprise, jumping on top of some Hydras. Byun's supply, though, does dip down. The Hydra count stays strong enough to actually take down the Marines. Very scary sight right there when only Hydras were left over against a decent number of Marines, with 2-2, by the way. Carapace fortunately had finished for Shin, so he's on 1-1-2, and that does help. But yeah, really good thing he had enough numbers there. Byun, he was caught by surprise. Simple as that. Shin, his army against Byun's in that scenario, it worked. But if Byun had actually sieged up the tanks preemptively and had a bit of a, knowledge of where the army was coming into and had pre-spread his Marines, all that stuff, like then his army, Shin's army, might not have actually been good enough. It would have been very difficult to dislodge, so a good choice to pounce on it before Byun was ready to go. Byun does lose a really important thing there as well. He's lost 8 tanks in the course of this game, only working off of 1 factory. So that tank decimation is probably the most important thing about that break. It does give Shin additional time to breathe as well, and in that time he gets up a 5th base. He's on 74 workers with plenty of production capability, and actually this now feels like a Zerg that is running away with the game. If Byun can't break one of these bases soon, that he will simply be overwhelmed. He will be up against a fully maxed Zerg player with 2-2-2, actually. And his 3-3 will be done. That's always good for a Terran player, but the amount of splash that he has might not be able to take care of the supply difference that naturally occurs in this matchup. Infestation bit is going to go down, but not before that Hive actually does get started. Good for Shin having enough resources to get that. Hydra then also is going to go down, but he still has 21 Hydras on the field. I would be much more worried, honestly, if the Baneling Nest or the Zerg, the spawning pool went down. But the Hydralisk Den could be replaced. Shin prioritizing the infestation pit. He's got a run-by going. He had another run-by that did kill a lot of SCVs. I did notice that. I forgot to mention it. So he's killed tons at this point. 39 SCVs have gone down. and the run-bys continue to distract as well as catch some reinforcements. Byun, the Brats' last push of this game, try once again to kill this 4th, 5th, whatever you want to call it. But Shin, not maxed out, still has plenty of army. He's going to jump on top of these 3 tanks that really cannot get all amazing shots. Banelings are coming in from every direction, so the tanks could not be as significant as they were in previous fights, and most of the supply now for Byun feels like it's in just those medevacs. One severely injured tank make its way to the front line is a pretty bad sign. SCV's not mining, and Byun is simply all over the place, unable to break Shin. Shin with some very last-second holds here, eventually getting the reward of kind of having an almost easier time, right? You still want to set up correctly and have the appropriate number of banelings, and that's exactly what he did. But at this point, it was a little bit easier of a game compared to the mud wrestle that was happening beforehand. And now, it should be smooth sailing. We can see that in the supply. We can see that kind of in the map. Even though the creep spread never got insane, it's still 5 bases to 3. And Byun probably knows that he's in a lot of trouble, and Shin knows that Byun should not win this game. But the one thing you do not want to do is underestimate a Terran with any amount of Marines left over. That's how you send your Banelings off creep in a single file into the Marines and you die. Because you still need Banelings. Even though it seems like the rest of your army might be powerful enough, you never want to test that theory. Hatchery once again in the sights of Byun. He's building bunkers on the front line as if this is a early TVP push. Bunkers usually, frankly, ineffective against Zerg, unless we're talking about a 2 or 3 Rex, of course. That's different. But otherwise, you don't usually see this. I mean, I would say simply for the fact that Banelings are just too good at blowing everything up, right? So, not to say that they don't soak Banelings, they do. It's just, I don't know, to me it's kind of like the Hellbat problem, which is that, you know, Hellbats sound theoretically good versus Zerg in the mid or early mid-late game, whatever. But they're kind of not. You'd rather have the tanks, the Widow Mines. The Hellbats can often be found in a similar disadvantageous position. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a cool thought. And I would love to see this work, as the 5th base did get torn down, but a 5th and a 6th are now on the way. Run by just aplenty, taking advantage of where Byun's army is not. And it's just really difficult to make this game work. Oh, got Banelings and connections. It's difficult to make a game like this work because you can't pounce. You can't rush. You can't catch the Zerg off guard right now. If, again, Shin had 0 Banelings for whatever reason, this Banelings was sniped and never rebuilt it, then there was a possibility that Byun just like go. But the longer that he can't just go, the more that Shin builds up Banelings, Lings, possibly even Hydras. No, he never bothered even making the Hydra list then. It's all Ling Baneling right now. He could add Infestors just to add something, like whatever he wanted to do. There can be a problem with these chokes. I will say that, but then you also don't necessarily need to fight in this choke. You know that Byun is broke. He is not going to win this game in any macro sense. So, if that means you have to give up your 3rd base, then so be it. Then Natural gets a little testy because the main base is still your heart. It's still where all your technology is. You don't want to lose track of that. But if need be, you probably could, as long as you take one hell of a fight, and that's what's coming in here, Blinding Clouds included. Unnecessary, most likely, but really going to ensure that Shin wins this battle. And Byun, not one to give up too easily, is he? He's going to pull back, and that's type out of this game. But the Ultralisk Cavern should be the nail in the coffin. Mass Marine, very few tanks, make that singular tank. One tank is not going to help against Ultras, which are scouted by the medevac drop that just got destroyed by the Abduct. Beyond perhaps hoping that maybe there's something about the minerals and gas to build any Ultras. And then, you know, they're still going for chitinous plating too. But you know what? You don't need the Ultra. It just would be the easiest way to win. This is also pretty easy. GG. Shin will strike back and tie up the series 1-1. Thank you very much, Dave Testa, for the 5 gifted subs, as well as Scout C Justice for the 500 bitty boos. Appreciate it, guys. It is September, so supporting your favorite streamers. with subscriptions is even cheaper now. Well, after it had its price changed to be more for some countries. Anyway. And now we got a tied-up series. Moving on to Dynasty. In the top right, it is Byun. And on the bottom left, it is Shin. Shin doing an excellent job hanging on, but kind of had a weird opener. And I still am not really sure if that was something that he was happy about, or that he kind of realized required some rejiggering in his brain. It's not often that you have that fast of a fourth base setup as a Zerg player, and it's because you are giving up other things to do so. So it sounds great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is great. You know, it's like great if you have 5 command centers, but if you're still only on 16 SCVs, I mean, is it really all that great? Kind of a similar concept. That's just, you know, way more overdramatic to make the point, but it might have been a very odd game for him actually to begin with. But as I was saying, it kind of all came together at the right moment. Maybe he would have had, I mean, basically more creep spread. Maybe he would have had more creep spread. Maybe he would have had more queens ready to tank on the front lines. But at the time which Byun really pushed, not his kind of fake push, Shin was ready. And honestly, by the time that Byun did do his kind of fake push, and it's a fake only if it has to be. Like, he can pull the trigger if he wants to on the non-medevac push, but for that, it was kind of a fake. He was also kind of ready already. 61 drones is not a bad place to be against someone who has committed to 2 bases to get that Marine timing that eventually does that on the medevacs. So, certainly by just looking at the game, it looked like Shin was totally fine with how the opener worked out. So perhaps he was just genuinely happy. Certainly, even if he had some doubts during it, like, oh, okay, okay, hold on, let me think this through. It does really help that Byun never once checked that 4th hatchery. I think that would have been a really, really vulnerable spot to his Marine push-out. If he had known about it, he would have forced Shin to make some very difficult decisions, basically. But it is what it is, and we got ourselves a tied series. Now we're on to the other most weird map, I guess. It is the weirdest, I suppose. Well, it's weirdest when you do this. So, this doesn't look very fun for Shin. Interesting choice to do this versus a Terran, by the way. Now, you can see one Reaper finding a weird amount of success in the early game, but that's just what's going to happen when you have to transfer your drones in such a fashion. And there is a Reaper hop-up spot there, so you get to abuse the back line. It's also a weird choice against someone who does often do a 2 racks opener, but I will say, like, you know, that I'm guessing Shin was like, he won't 2 racks open because he won't have as much abuse on, like, my 3rd base that a 2 racks usually would. You know, usually the 2 racks with 3 Reapers can kill a couple of drones, force out a couple more lings, but it also can threaten the 3rd hatch, especially if your drone doesn't make it to the 3rd hatch location, which it's harder on this map because your 3rd is right there. So he's like, Byun won't do it. Which he was right. Byun did not open up with a 2 racks on this map. But he did still find an incredible amount of damage for the early game, I would say. Kills 4 drones, 2 lings, does eventually lose the Reaper. The Reaper, though, did everything it needed and more, because really all it needed to do was scout the location of the hatchery and then also the Roachborn. Those 2 things, its job was already pretty much done. And then it added a couple more drone kills to it, so pretty awesome. Byun clearly in the know this is going to be scary to hold with his only Marine presence. Again, one of the downsides of the builds that he chooses, you do not have your catch-all factory to produce that Cyclone or that tank that really saves you from most things. So a bunker went up. But this is a bunker between supply depots, so it's also one of the least costly ways for a Terran player to defend. So you got like a double whammy problem for the Zerg player. Not only is your build not a surprise, but even if you manage to crack to the high ground, you're not cracking usually as bad as you would hope. You know, you're not taking care of an entire factory's worth of production now you're camping it. What the hell? That's a very dangerous maneuver if the Zerg player is all-inning, which he definitely is. But thank God this was just to go ahead and test the waters on the front line. I thought he was going to shit over to the main, and that would have been really weird. It still is kind of weird, just because, you know, if you have to unload during the battle, you're in a really tough spot. But I guess he assumed that supply depot in the bunker would hold at least for a little while, and he was 100% correct about that. It has held long enough. The tank actually going to go over to the natural to stop the denial of the mining, which I think is fair enough. The Marines, you know, usually the Ling Swarm is a really scary portion of this all-in, but not if you're on a ramp. And usually if you're on the ramp, then there's Roach Ravager killing your Marines. There's just not that much Roach Ravager. So he doesn't want to stay there, obviously. He's doing the back and forth dance, but the Ling surround is never going to happen. Now the Ravager's also getting too low and getting shot down. This just seems, well, impossible. He does actually get a surround, but how long did that last? 0.7 seconds, maybe? The Marine numbers were already too high, even without combat shields. And that is a not great game for Shin. You kind of have to commit, though, obviously, as the Zerg player, even though you know that everything's been scouted and it's already been reduced in its efficiency because of the drone kills. It's like, there's no other choice. You gotta go for it. And hey, if Byun had played too fancy-dancy with the medevac drops, or I don't know, I guess that's the only issue. Then, or let his supply depot, or like never built a wall, I guess. Like, then I guess it could have worked, but definitely not against this. And it feels like Shin really wants to abuse this lack of technology from the Terran, and just never hits the right time. Because even if he was hoping there wasn't a tank, there actually wasn't one when he started the attack. But that was not the problem. By the time he was ready to go, the Marine count had gotten to that critical mass. Because it was, in a way, it was a kind of greedy opener from Byun, to be fair, as well. But, yeah, not a great game from Shin. GG. Sometimes that's how it happens. Ooh, it's warm in here. In the top right, we do have Byun now on post-youth. And he is one map away from winning the finals. In the bottom left, it is Shin, who had another awkward game. He didn't really do anything wrong, necessarily. It was kind of just the way that a game like that would look, I think. There is a chance that the Reaper goes to the main immediately, doesn't chase down the transferring drones for some reason, gets killed prior to seeing the Roach Warren. I guess there's a chance. It does seem unlikely. The Reaper would notice something was amiss pretty quickly and go around scouting, and then once you see that that's where the gold base is taken with the Rich Vespian Geyser, the kind of alarm bells start ringing in your head, and I don't know. But it's so much more about the build choice than the execution, is what I'm trying to say. So like there's very little Shin could do to have made that look better, I think. And then you just do what you got to do, which is try the all-in and hope that they're not going to be good against it. But Byun, it definitely was. So, as I said before, after game 1, which was awkward but not nearly as one-sided as game number 3, Shin's pretty good at shaking these things off. Like, I tried it, you know, whatever, another map that I wasn't really looking forward to playing. Bah, whatever. And then you move on. Move on to post-youth, actually, which is a map that initially we had a couple of 2-racks attempts trying to abuse perhaps that farther, that's the word I'm looking for, the farther away third base. So, you know, the last map I was pointing out how easy it is to grab that third base because it is really just right there as it looks like a natural, right? This is a map where the natural is clearly very easy. Then the third is a little farther away. Only place you can get to it is through this one choke, so the Reaper can just literally stay here and be a bother, and if you got 3 Reapers, even better, right? But we saw Zerg players, I think, pretty quickly adapt to that, and now it's considered a map that is really bad for multiple racks Reapers. So that's probably why Byun isn't going for it, even though he usually likes it as a build. And he definitely does some things where it's like, well, typically pros would say don't do this, and Byun definitely still does those things. But seems like even he has accepted this is not really going to be a punishing moment for an aggressive opener, so just go into the typical opener. The 1-Rax expands. SCV looks like it's going to build an extremely fast 3rd CC, because it's not that it's so much fast as it is on location. No, it's also just extremely fast. You got 2 Reapers, a Reactor, obviously still overall a little gas. These 2 Reapers, by the way, actually have a surprisingly fun time in the natural right now. And got his 3rd CC down on location prior to his natural finishing. Kind of a scary situation, I would say. The 3rd CC coming down much faster than the 3rd of the Zerg. Again, maybe not all that unique, but the exact timing of it seems pretty good for Byun. I would say that the 3rd hatch comes down later on post-youth, and so there is a chance that a 3cc build does happen before, but it's still usually on the high ground, so it's kind of like is it faster because it's got a lift and whatever, but it is now on location. And you can see Shin can see that, but as far as we can actually do against it is limited. He can send slowlings across the map, and the Reapers would have chomped on them all. Now that speed is done, he can go across the map, but that's where the 3rd CC finishes. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that probably exactly what Byun was figuring would happen so that he would not have to worry about placing it down location? Huh! Of course, I think you would still be better off trying to threaten this, because it is a little greedy. And, well, okay! Also grabbing what little defense there is. These are all good things. The 3rd CC can't be producing the SCVs or mining with the SCVs it did produce. If it's forced to lift after completing the orbital over 4, even better! It's all the damage that Byun was probably hoping it would not have. Oh, and this is also something that now the community is talking about. Back to the Spire, ZVT goes. Perhaps this actually might be a done deal because of the Lings, however. I don't think the Lings will cause a tap out, but oh, this is not a pretty game right now for Byun. It was a beautiful game up until those Lings got across the map. He was not supposed to have this happen. He was supposed to kind of, poke and prod with the Reaper Hellion on the front like he did, and then see too many Lings, go, okay, this guy must be doing something. Pull back safely. Delay his 3rd CC, a little bit, like those SCVs would have to pull over, but then the Hellions would have come back. There would have been 4 to 6 Hellions, plus the 2 Reapers, plus the Banshee would eventually arrived. And then that would have pretty much solidified the defense of the 3rd CC. 6 Hellions certainly would have. 4 is a little testy area, but yeah, with the micro, you usually do it. And instead, so many units did go down. Now, at the cost of 20 Lings, could have been 10 drones. Got to always figure that Zerg math in there, right? But I think it's actually really good because behind it, Shin is going for a tech cheese, I'll call it. 3 hatcheries, yes, but this fast of a Spire on 51 drones, of which 12 of them, did I do that right? 12 of them are actually mining gas. Like, you do not have a lot of foundation as a Zerg player when you go for this fast of a Spire. But if you find the opponent without anything that shoots up, then it very much is worth it. And while Byun is hurrying up and getting all those things that shoot up, right? He's getting missile turrets, he's protecting his production, he's getting Marines. He's actually getting a tank, which I can see why, but I'll explain in a second. But anyway, it doesn't shoot up. It still is a very, very, very tense moment for Byun, who did just lose a lot of units that don't shoot up. It still would have been helpful against these Lings, leaving the Marines, the missile turrets, only to deal with the Mutas. Unfortunately, with the Lings added in, sometimes it's all that is necessary to actually end the game with Ling Muta. No Banelings required. The missile turrets will probably, again, stop this from being a true game-ending moment, but just like those Lings getting into the main base earlier, it just makes it an extremely ugly game. This does not feel good to play as a Terran player, and you know that it's probably just going to get worse. Because this first interaction with the Ling Muta is really so important. It's so telling as to what is going to happen with Ling Muta after this. Because if it is rebuffed instantly, nothing happens. The mutas are like, oh, sorry, JK. The Zerg is in an absolutely terrible spot. Even though they will pseudo-contain the Terran player for a little while, again, that foundation is entirely missing. The drone count's missing. The Baneling type is missing. The upgrades are missing. But if it works like this, it's just a snowball. More creep, more hatcheries, more mutas, more lings, eventually getting those upgrades. While you're still trying to ensure your third CC can actually mine, they're getting up to an invitation bid or something like that. This actually, oh no! That tank shot, it killed more Marines than lings. That's what it felt like anyway as a Terran player. I was saying that might actually been an overreach by Shin, but it worked out fine. Oh, there was another tank shooting too that probably added some AoE on the friendlies. Less than ideal. And by the way, back to the tanks, I paused because I saw a tank instead of a Widow Mine. Yeah, the Widow Mine does shoot up, but it also is a one-shot wonder. And sometimes it's not a wonder, it's a douche. It hits your own units. So, I did understand going for the tank, but it was all about whether or not he actually had enough to stop the mutas from really snowballing, and he did. But it's still the combination that is truly deadly anyway. It's like, great, the mutas don't win the game by themselves. It always feels a little embarrassing as a Terran player, but you are still overall losing this game. Yeah. This is going to get so much more out of control. And eventually, he will love to add on Thors and maybe eventually even add on Widow Mine with Drilling Claws and hide them around the map, like eventually. But right now, he needed something that was consistent, that was going to help him against the lings and the potential banelings that sometimes do arrive on the front line. In this case, Shin never did that, but he could have. Tanks are very dependable. Except those tanks that died to all those lings. They were useless. Banelings are being made, by the way, a mere seconds away from finishing, but Byun's timing actually pretty much perfect. Very dangerous maneuver. You do not see the loading bars right there as a Terran player, but that was a good call, and Byun going to continue with this momentum. Uh-oh. Byun, his aggression might just save his life here. The mutas still do not want to tackle that many Marines on their own, but the Banelings are forming finally in a safe location. 10 drones did go down. Both Evolution Tippers went down as well. The Banelings is also in trouble. The fourth hatchery, no, the third actually, is going to go down, and that fifth looks also like a goner. This could not have been more perfectly timed. Honestly, because I feel like even if it was timed before the Banelings were morphing, there were still lings. That might have still been better, actually. But this might still be enough. Byun did not pull back when he had the chance to off of that creep, and the Banelings take their prize, all making connections, and Byun is going to tap out. 3, 4 Zerg hatcheries still up, still at least 52 drones. Most importantly, the muta count wasn't actually touched all that much. So this would have been a... what am I looking for? It would have been a... slog. There we go. It would have been a slog for the Zerg to recover. But they would have had all the map control with the mutas. They would have had all the harassment with the mutas. They would have had all of the time, I guess, also read into that, right? Because they're going to replace that base and then just, boom, instantly pump out as many drones as possible before going back to army. Like, it makes sense he tapped out. But that looked like it might have been Byun's ticket to a win. He had just found these Banelings too. I really wonder what would have happened. But Shin will take post-youth and tie us up to 2-2. I feel like when people ask me where are the kitties, they don't understand what cats are. You know? They think I'm like some like ringmaster who can like click a little clicker and then the cats come and they sit in their positions for my stream. When really, it's just very fortunate if they ever decide to be in stream position. It's a blessing, not the expectation. The final map is going to be Alcyone, so a very even playing ground for these two players. On the bottom left, it is Byun, and on the top right, it is Shin. Shin actually only losing the games that he tries to cheese. Let me just point that out. You know, Shin definitely, to me, deserves the credit of being an aggressive Zerg. I think that he is still best when he's aggressive. I think he's scariest when he can be kind of that, like, what exactly are you doing here, buddy, type of Zerg. But he also tends to prove a lot of the, oh, he's just a cheeser, or he only wins because he's such a weird guy. doubters wrong, because he actually has plenty of games where he plays really good macro. It's just not, to me, what really is highlighted for him. But that is the case in this best of 5. Shin tries to cheese on the kind of despicable maps for the Zerg players. It doesn't work. That happens. And that's kind of what Shin's been forced to do, is be like, I'll just win the macro game in the next game, which so far has actually worked out for him. Byun is going back to his 2 racks after a brief hiatus, I suppose, because of the maps and the situations. Going back to the 2 racks, of which he could do a multitude of things beyond that. Now he's liked the 3 racks into the 2 base committal kind of situation so far. He doesn't have to do that. He could do again, like a 4 racks after the command center. He could do a 3cc. You know, that last game's 3cc was an off of a 2 racks. It also just never really got to go. It never really happened. Which, by the way, also just really cool call from Shin. I didn't highlight how cool of a call that was, I think, as much as I wanted to. Because I was going to talk about how people are kind of looking at the Muta again as if it could be the savior. As if it could really mix things up. And people just love Baneling Muta, right? It's a very iconic matchup. But specifically for that situation, I really liked the Muta choice. I think if it wasn't already going a little poorly, I would have been a doubter for the fast Mutas. Because basically what seems to have happened, like this is the reason that we've seen Mutas disappear from this matchup. What seems to have happened is not just the maps changing and metas developing, whatever. It's kind of because, to me, the Terran was just so good at reading Muta builds. You know, it's like Mutas have existed since the dawn of time. Yet I can still imagine games in like 2013, 14, where the Zerg was kind of just getting almost like a surprise over the Terran, but they were the Mutas were just not being handled as well as they could be. And it feels like Terran's really got a handle on that. So, you know, the fast Muta builds that were supposed to kind of shock and awe your opponent were really not working. But that was already going well for Shin, which is why I really liked it. And this is a good old-fashioned cheese. This is a Baneling bust. It's not the cheesiest one, with it actually only on 2 bases that you would only experience on ladder, but it basically is. It basically is. That is an extremely fast Baneling nest. And unless Shin was under the impression this was an actual 4 racks or something, which he really shouldn't be, this is about him attacking. 100%. So we did see this, you know, when the 2 racks was being used by everyone and their moms. We did see some Zerg players throw in a cheeky Bane bust. And it was very effective. I recall Solar doing it to get like his 1 map victory against Byun in a couple of tournaments. Or against Maru, like whoever was using the 2 racks. Will it work here? But will it work for us? Well, Byun has no idea about it. I feel like if he did, a bunker would be called for. Uh-oh. That's a lot of lings behind this. The Banelings! They do their job by breaking open the wall. It's the lings and their surrounds that really does the trick. And you just don't have enough units. You know what? It feels like Shin was trying to find this particular timing this entire series. And he did it with Roches the first 2 times and it didn't work. And then he was like, oh, Ling Baneling. And this is the timing I was trying to explain. The time at which you don't have more like the safe factory units to protect you. You just have a certain number of Marines, which even with the absolute best micro in the world, will not take care of this much Zerg. If you had 4 Hellions, if you had 6 Hellions, easy peasy lemon squeezy. That's what Terrans usually have against Zerg, and that's why a Baneling bust is a rare sight in professional tournaments. But every so often, there's that 2-raxer who is hoping they don't get killed prior to having 16 Marines, and this Baneling bust does work against that. If the Terran figures it out some way, somehow, whatever, there are alternative defenses. But, of course, with this being totally unscouted, it basically is a build counter. Kind of. It's that strong. You know, it was pretty easy when Shin busted through that wall. So GG's, well played by Shin. I feel like this, wasn't exactly an execution battle. Although some of the macro games are pretty cool. This was a lot about the builds. And Shin ended up winning out come game 5. So good for him. And that was the premier Urasauraus Cup Finals. So this will be coming back for the next couple of weeks as we wait for more news from ESL. So thanks for watching, guys. Do support the tournaments and make sure to tune in on Monday when there is live coverage. And I'll see you guys later for more StarCraft.